Welcome, lovers of the sweet science, to Who the Man here on ProBox TV, your boxing channel. I gotta say it like that. To me, it's a little bit smooth. Anyway, I'm George DiMattelis filling in for Jimmy Smith, and we got the champs here, Chris Algieri, Paulie Malignaggi, and Hall of Fame trainer Teddy Atlas joining us here on Who the Man. And we might have to learn how to say Who the Man in Ukrainian when we talk about what's going on with the lightweights at 135. But before we get to the Ukrainians, let's talk about the man who will be fighting on July 6th. One is Shakur Stevenson, putting his WBC belt on the line against Artem Harutyunyan. I hope I said that right. Chris, tell us about Shakur Stevenson. What is his strengths, his weaknesses? What is his claim to being the best at 135? I
mean, there's no question about what Shakur does. I mean, he's a master boxer. I think he's the best judge of distance in the game today. He's has a fantastic southpaw jab. He understands the sweet science very well. Has very high boxing IQ. You know, great amateur background, Olympian. You know, and as a pro, has been moving along very fast, progressing great. Has had some ups and downs in terms of, you know, what people think about his performances, but at the end of the day, all boxing people, everyone who understands what they're watching, understands that he is a next level talent and the kind of guy that would give anyone trouble if not beat everybody around him. And I think a lot of people still to this day are in the group that would say that he can beat all of these guys, and he can. I mean, he definitely has that ability. Listen, I say this all the time about pound for pound. If you look throughout history, especially recently, the pound for pound guys are always the guys with the best defense. Defense is what separates the champions. The highest level guys, the elite guys, don't get hit. Shakur is one of the best defensive fighters in the game today. And he creates a lot of openings. His ability, again, the judging of distance for me is something that is super special about him. His understanding of the game, what happens in between those ropes. But the issue, you know, is that he's not the most exciting fighter at all, which is me being nice, because a lot of guys think he's actually very boring. So, you know, to the boxing purist, you love what he does, but to the guys who are looking for exciting fights, they probably dislike Shakur Stevenson.
All right, Paulie, make the case for Shakur Stevenson as the man in 135.
Well, I'll tell you what, I personally love the lightweight division because it's full of guys with high boxing IQs on top of being terrific fighters. We got a stacked weight class that is full of talent, full of terrific world-class fighters, and they all really have a high boxing IQ as well here at the top of the weight class. And Shakur Stevenson, being on the subject with him, I think sometimes his IQ is so high, he's a bit misunderstood as a fighter. You know, the champ Chris Algieri made a great point. He said a lot of times, most of the time, probably all the time, the top pound-for-pound guy is a very good defensive fighter. Defense wins championships. I'll raise the stakes on that. It's in all sports. The top team wins championships because of defense. I can remember, to make an example, the 90s Atlanta Braves and the 95. I remember 95, the Cleveland Indians with its super power hitting team, and the Atlanta Braves had the pitching. They shut them down. You know what I mean? You look at any other sport, defense wins those championships, even if it's not always appreciated as the most exciting way to play. You still need that good balance to score, but you need that high level defense. I'll tell you what the problem in boxing is, unlike other sports. When a guy is superb defensively, people don't want to fight him. You know, there's a lot of reasons people can duck each other. In other sports, you get to see the very exciting team that will get your appetite wet. You know, you want to see them because they're so exciting. And you get to see them against a team that specializes in defense, and you get to see the team that specializes in defense suddenly shut them down completely when that offensive team had been so exciting prior. That's Shakur Stevenson for you. You know, he's a guy who doesn't really have competitive fights because he's so good. It's mainly defensively. He transitions that defense to offense, but ever so slightly so that he's not so exciting. Yes, it can be a criticism as far as excitement factor, excitement value, but as far as his effectiveness, this is a world-class fighter. And I think boxing fans are a bit different than other sports in that I think they almost accept the fact that, hey, they don't fight because he's boring, and they'll accept it. You know, I don't know if it's a bandwagon thing, whether you just don't want to see your guy get beat by a guy who's going to be a defensive specialist and will probably shut him out. But, you know, in other sports, you get to see that. You get the playoffs and you get to watch it. And you get to see who's better, who's the man, so to speak, as far as the teams are concerned. Even in one-on-one sports like tennis, you know, you get to see it. In boxing, you don't always get to see it. And I think that's Shakur Stevenson's dilemma right now. But certainly a very cerebral fighter, world-class.
All right, Teddy, what's the case for Shakur Stevenson as being the man at 135 in your view?
Oh, he's got the most difficult style to deal with of all the elite fighters in boxing today. And not only to beat, but to look good against. That's why a lot of guys don't want to fight him for that reason too, because it's hard to get paid against him because of what both champions touched on, especially Chris, about sometimes there's no getting around it. He's boring, but it depends again what your taste is. If you're a baseball fan, I've used this analogy before. If you're a baseball fan, you want to see pitching. Hey, you're gonna love Shakur Stevenson. You want to see a guy that shuts somebody out like a great pitcher, that doesn't throw the ball 100 miles an hour, but he hits the corners. He changes speeds. He takes the bat out of the hands of the batter. If you want to go there and you want to see home runs, you're staying home. You're not watching Stevenson if you want to see that. But I think that he needs to have his Floyd Mayweather moment. And both the champions are going to know what I'm talking about. That moment that he had with Diego Corrales, where he went and took him apart. And Floyd, some people were saying the same thing a little bit, not as much, but a little bit about Floyd. He's a defensive fighter. He doesn't take chances. You can't hit him, all those kind of things. And then he goes in there with Diego Corrales, who good puncher, good fighter, champion, tremendous. And he takes him apart. So I think that people are waiting for that moment, to be honest with you, and waiting if that moment exists in the career and in the future of Stevenson.
And Shakur Stevenson, also the youngest of the belt holders at lightweight. So then maybe that might influence your decision. All right, let's, I talked about, how do you say who the man in Ukrainian? Well, let's talk about one of those Ukrainians, 36-year-old Vasiliy Lomachenko, currently the IBF champion, coming off an 11th round TKO victory over George Kambosos Jr. All right, Paulie, what's the case for Vasiliy Lomachenko as the best at 135?
I'll tell you what, the case for Lomachenko is probably his body of work. Yes, he's still good. It's hard to really judge it based on the dominance over George Kambosos, who, let's face it, has barely won any round since beating Lopez several fights ago. But he's got that great performance. He's won him the IBF title. He's got a resume that is, among that's stacked essentially from amateur to pro and whatnot. And he had at one time unified all three of the four lightweight world championships on his way to coming close to becoming the undisputed champion. The claim to fame is for Lomachenko, I think, is more on a nostalgia basis. You want to believe that he's got what you'd like to believe that he's got what he used to have still left in the tank. He is a guy who, personally for me, I give him a lot of credit because he could easily probably fight at 130 and unify the division, but he doesn't get up for fights that are too easy for him. This man is really, really super competitive. He's not I wouldn't say that he's probably not the best businessman. He's so competitive that he'll take on the toughest fights, even when it's not conducive to him from a business standpoint. And that isn't what a lot of other fighters in the sport do. And I noticed something. It gives credence to the guys who pick their fights more carefully, because I notice now those guys get more credit than somebody like Lomachenko, who is unbelievably, has accomplished some unbelievable things and has taken some losses on the way to trying to accomplish more unbelievable things and to consistently try to test himself, because in his own area, he's not tested. Move up in weight, face world-class fighters, face them out of their prime, so on and so forth. He's not really been given the credit necessary, but then you see guys who pick and choose and manipulate just ever so slightly, still world class, but you see them get a ton of credit. So I think if you're a guy who's trying to look for the way to make Lomachenko the man in this who the man, you're probably looking at all these factors and you can really appreciate him. Can he be the man still at his age? Well, those are questions that we all can ask ourselves.
All right, Teddy, what do you think of Lomachenko and his case at 135?
Look, he's getting long in the tooth a little bit. It's hard to say you see slippage. You probably could have said it maybe a couple fights ago, possibly, even though he's been fighting, like to Paulie's point, he only fights great guys, the best guys, top guys. So, it's hard to say you see slippage because he's fighting top guys. You know, if he's fighting a lesser guy, then you can say, oh, gee, he should have done better. But against a top guy, it's hard to evaluate that way. You know, guys like Haney and all these guys. And a lot of those fights, you know, a lot of people make an argument he won those fights. And then he, of course, fights Kambosos, and he looks tremendous. I mean, you got to. I'm ashamed to even use the word slippage after I see that. But in that fight,
But Teddy, that's actually a guy who is a step down in competition compared to
yeah,
what he's fought.
that's what I was gonna say. That in that fight, you know, and I don't want to take anything away from Loma, but in that fight, you don't know how much was Kambosos, how much was Loma. You're not sure. All you know is he looks spectacular. That you do know, but I'd rather have this conversation a couple years ago, to be honest. You know, I'd like to get in that DeLorean and drive that car backwards, you know, a couple of years, like Back to the Future movie. But we can't do that. But I tell you what he does stand for. He stands for what Paulie touched on. A guy who has pride, so much pride. He only wants to fight the best. So much confidence, so much pride. A guy that is exactly what he was built to be and what he was made to be, almost in a test tube. From the time he was born, his father, kind of like Tiger Woods with his father made a plan to make him a great fighter. And that was it. Everything was to make him a great fighter. What does he do? In the amateurs, he wins 2 gold medals. This is a guy who had the mentality put in him, developed in him from the beginning, to Paulie's case, point again. Because it's a good point that he only should be fighting the best. Nothing else exists for him. Nothing else is worthwhile. Nothing else matters. This is the guy who, when he made a deal with Bob Arum in Top Rank, Bob Arum couldn't believe it. He told him, listen, if I go with you, I want to fight for the world title, my first fight. That's what he said to him. That was the deal with Agus Clemens, his manager. Said, I want to fight the first. Wound up, he fought in the second fight for the world title. And then he won the world title in his third fight. So this is a guy who, you know, he that's what he brings. When you say who the man with him is a guy that, 2 things, 2 parts. One is that he exemplifies what a world champion's about. Fighting the best, wanting to fight the best, believing you're the best. And the other thing is, to put a bow on it, he's everything that the other guys are, what Chris talked about, defense, and Paul talked about, so important defense. He gave you at his best defense and offense. Not too many guys combined it that way. He gave you defense while he was walking you down and pulling your heart out of your chest like a kung fu fighter. Yeah, and he pulled it right out of their chest, and he left them standing there until they fell. He did that, and you didn't hit him while he was doing it. He completely took away your physicality and your spirit to fight. That's who the man is. Him.
All right, Chris. You got to follow that there with the Bruce Lee and the Back to the Future references there from Teddy. What do you think about Lomachenko?
I'm going to keep it real tight because following these 2 brilliant guys talking about everything they said is absolutely true. You know, I've been around Lomachenko and his team a very long time. You mentioned Aegis, and I know these guys. Actually, Lomachenko fought on my undercard of Macau. That's how far back it goes. But to your point, both of your points, he's the guy who's looking for the best fights possible because he needs to get up for it because he's that type of competitor. And like you said, Teddy, he's been that his entire life, literally since he was born. He's been that guy going for the biggest, toughest fights out there. The issue for me now is the guys, I think he beats everyone handily in the weight class except for the very tip-top guys. And those are the only guys he wants to fight. So he's in a very, very difficult position right now. Has he slipped? To a degree, absolutely. But even an 80% Lomachenko is better than 99% of the world. So he's in a very curious situation from an analyst standpoint in terms of where he's at right now compared to where he's been and the landscape of the division.
All right, time for a quick break here on Who the Man. When we return, we'll talk about Lomachenko's fellow countrymen and the Tank from Baltimore here on ProBox TV, your boxing channel. Welcome back to Who the Man here on ProBox TV, your boxing channel. All right, let's continue the discussion of lightweight at 135. Teddy Atlas, give us the case for Gervonta Tank Davis as the best in the division.
We're talking about today, right? Today.
Yeah.
We're talking about today, right now, today, now. Okay, right now, today. There's got to be a movie reference in there somewhere, Paulie. I know there is. Somewhere there's a movie reference in there. But we're talking about today, right now, this minute. Tank Davis is the man. I mean, both champions early on, they talked about the cerebral part, the defense, the cerebral part that really separates the top guys. It's not just the physicality, because there's a lot of guys that have the physicality. They have the goods, the physical goods, the power, the speed, the footwork, the technique, all of that. But they don't have the cerebral part. They're not smart enough. They're not able to make the decisions under fire and to keep themselves together under fire, to make the right choices under fire, to be calm in an uncalm environment. Tank Davis is all of that, all of it. And that is what makes him the man. That's what makes him so dangerous. Yeah, he can punch, but he's technically solid. Yeah, he can put pressure on, but he can counterpunch. He can set traps. He can use his legs to move around a little bit and wait for the right spot, the right entry point to come in with a dangerous guy. He can do it all, and he can figure it out on the fly with the cerebral part I'm talking about, right? And he's at his prime. See, that's the key. That's the part you got to put in there. He's at his prime right now. He's a dangerous guy right now. He's a dangerous, really scary proposition right now. So if you fight a guy like him, usually you say, okay, you got a guy like Shakur Stevenson or whatever. You say, okay, we're going to box. We're going to control. But, he can go and we're going to frustrate him. He's going to try to get to us, but we're going to frustrate him. He doesn't get frustrated. He takes his time. He's deliberate. A lot of times at the beginning, people thought he was just a seek and destroy missile. They thought he was just a guy that got to you. And they thought that he would get over anxious. He don't get over anxious. He takes his time. He slowly closes those gaps, inch by inch, step by step, and then he gets to you. And he does it any way that he has to do it. Yeah, he's got the full package. He's Freddy Krueger right now, I think, in that division.
All right. Nightmare on 135th Street. All right, Chris, what about Tank Davis?
I mean, just like Teddy said, he's got everything. He's got the boxing IQ, he's got the physicality, he's got the mindset. He's in his physical prime, just like you said, Teddy. And I always liken him, his nickname is the Tank for a reason. He slowly positions himself into that location that needs to be, and then he unleashes heavy artillery, just like a tank would on a battlefield. Mm-hmm. But you know what beats a tank? Something that's agile, something that can move, something that can defend. So the question becomes, what happens when he meets another defensive wizard, like a la Shakur Stevenson in the weight class, right? So this is why I'm not going to go right away and be like, Tank's the man, because, listen, there's another guy in this weight class who is just as good on many fronts. Obviously, he's not a puncher. He's not a finisher. He doesn't have as much experience. He's not in the physical prime where Tank is at. But he has that thing that we've all talked about as being pound-for-pound level, which is defense. Listen, if you can't hit a guy, doesn't matter how much firepower you have. If you can't hit him, doesn't matter. If you can't detonate the bomb in the right place, it doesn't matter how much power you have. Doesn't matter how many megatons you have in that left hand. If you can't land it, it doesn't matter. So defense always comes into play, but Tank has it all. And it's very interesting because we have a guy who's so good and so offensive and so destructive, and then we have another guy who's so defensive and so hard to hit and such a good judge of distance. It's a very, very interesting weight class, 135, which is exactly why we're talking about it right now. Who's the man?
All right, Paulie, make the case for Tank Davis.
Yeah, and he's exciting, the most exciting fighter out of these guys at this point. Teddy made a great point. He's in his prime. He's the biggest puncher out of these guys. Which makes him super exciting because even casuals understand big punching power and are attracted to it, which is what made a guy like Mike Tyson so popular even among casuals. And of course, he's got that IQ. He's got the more experienced Tank is getting, the smarter he's looking in the ring. He's always had that athleticism, which athleticism can translate to high boxing IQ if you know how to mesh it together. And when you're seeing that with Tank Davis, I think he's getting better as he's come along, and he's looked really, really terrific. And that last performance against Frank Martin, for me, for me, probably a career best performance. And he's had several really good performances in his career, but that was something special. I mean, it was like, at the end, when he finally got to Martin, which you kind of already saw the writing on the wall for some rounds already, a good fighter himself, Martin, he hurt him, and then he kind of had him frozen, and before hitting him with that left hand, it was almost like that Mortal Kombat video game where it's like, finish him, and he was like, and it was like, he knocked him right out, and that was it. He finished him off.
But we just need to see the spine come up or him pull the head out of the body like that.
It's a family-oriented show.
Oh, okay, yeah, my bad. All right, let's talk about Lomachenko's fellow countryman, Denys Berinchyk, stunning the world by winning the championship, the WBO championship against Emmanuel Navarrete. All right, Teddy, what's the case for Berinchyk as the man at 135?
Yeah, he's the new man on the block, and nobody knew he was moving in. Nobody saw it coming. You know what I mean? All of a sudden, you saw this U-Haul truck pull up, say, "Oh, we got a new guy on the block." Wow, I didn't know that anybody sold their house. I didn't realize that we were getting a new neighbor here. But we did. We got a new neighbor, a hungry kid, a kid who's from the Ukraine, a kid who's also representing his country, that war-torn country that's going through what they're going through, that represents hope over there. He's got all of that in the backdrop, and he's just a solid guy. There's nothing really fancy about. All the other guys we talked about, the two champions put it perfectly. We've got one who's a defensive whiz, real fast hands too. Another guy who, punches with TNT. We have another guy who does nothing but believe that he wants to fight the best in the world. He's a two-time gold medalist in Lomachenko, a guy who won the world title in his third fight, a guy who's gone on 3 weight classes, a guy who, if he still has some of his past in him, can beat anybody, and he can do it in an exciting fashion. And then you got this guy. You got a guy who, who just comes along and he just gets it done. He's solid. He's busy. He's not a big puncher. He's technically solid. He can counter. He can fight inside. He's reliable. Those are characteristics. I always talk about, everybody gets crazy, and I get it, about the neon, the stuff that lights up the sky, the speed, the power, the explosiveness, all that stuff. Well, he ain't that guy. But you know who he is? He's the guy that has those quiet talents that you could depend on him. Dependability, reliability, steadiness, consistency. Those are good talents. Those talents, they will keep you there when other people have other talents that sometimes are a little bit, as I touched on, a little bit more exciting, a little bit they catch eye, but those talents of just being reliable, they're important. They show up when it's important to show up.
All right, Paulie, what about Denys Berinchyk at 135?
Well, again, Teddy, I love following up Teddy because he puts other good ideas in my head, and yeah, I love that point that he made. Nobody knew he was moving in. Everybody expected Navarrete to be the lightweight champion, and it ended up being Berinchyk, But what happens? I think about when you're moving in on the block, and it's like it's a certain neighborhood, and then some undesired people move in on the block, and what is it? They go, oh, there goes the neighborhood. There goes the neighborhood. Well, you know what? For Berinchyk to last in this weight class, you would need the whole neighborhood to go. You would need the neighborhood to kind of dissipate and lower itself to the standards of Berinchyk. And this neighborhood is just too good. I mean, you talk about the neon, Teddy. Shakur has the neon. Gervonta has the neon. Lomachenko has the neon. Berinchyk doesn't have the neon, and you kind of need neon to stick around at a high level at a weight class this deep in talent. So I don't think the neighborhood's going anywhere. I think he's going to move on to the block, and the block is not going to treat him so good. And before we know it, he's going to probably move back out. And
see a for sale sign? You tell me we're going to see a for sale sign on the door?
Yeah. You're telling me there's a chance. Exactly. I'm telling you there's a chance we might see that in the not too distant future with Berinchyk. But in the meantime, he's going to hang around like he belongs.
All right, Chris, before we head to break, tell us about Berinchyk, why he might be the man at 135.
I'm gonna tell you this: he's not long for this weight class. He's not long for this level. I'm gonna put it to real estate because Florida real estate is crazy right now.
Oh yeah, always.
Right? He's gonna make money on his investment, but he's not gonna be here long. He's gonna flip this situation. He's gonna flip this situation real quick. He is not on the level of any of these other guys. Even guys that are not champion, guys like William Zepeda, cannot hang with these guys. As far as I'm concerned, until I see something else from him, he is right place, right time. That's it.
All right, time for a quick break here on Who the Man. We spoke about 2 Americans, 2 Ukrainians. We're going to sprinkle in a Mexican coming up on the other side here on ProBox TV. Who the Man at 135? Welcome back to Who the Man. Now, the next fighter we're going to talk about is the #1 contender by all 4 governing bodies of boxing. His nickname is El Camarón, the shrimp, but he ain't no shrimp. We're going to call him El Tiburón, the shark. William Zepeda fights July 6th against Giovanni Cabrera. Chris, what is about Zepeda that makes him the #1 contender here?
I like this guy, man. I mean, he's #1 in all those governing bodies for a reason. He is a two-fisted destroyer who throws a tremendous amount of punches. I mean, his output's out of control. But also, I've noticed in recent fights, as he stepped up his competition quite a bit, he's actually good, too. Like, he sets things up. He sets traps. His boxing IQ is a lot higher than I think people gave him credit for, even myself, because I saw him as kind of a two-fisted destroyer, just like I talked at the Open. But he's better than that. And similar to how I thought about Pitbull Cruz when he was at 135, I want to see him with everybody. I want to see William Zepeda with everybody. I don't know if he beats everybody. I don't know if he beats Tank. I don't know if he beats Shakur. I don't even know if he beats Lomachenko. But I want to see him fight every one of those guys because he's a very exciting style. He pushes the pace. And I think even those guys who are maybe at a higher level, definitely at a higher level, he can push them to places that we're going to have to see them do things maybe they haven't done before. Because he's big, he throws a lot of punches, he has great endurance. Looks like he can punch, too, with both hands. So I like William Zepeda. I like the way he fits into this weight class, rounds out this very interesting weight class because we talk about defense, we talk about offense, we talk about detonation power. Now we got a guy who's a volume guy, and he's durable, and he's big, and he's young, and he's undefeated. So this weight class is so much fun because of the variety of all the top guys.
All right, Teddy, tell us about William Zepeda. What did you like about him?
What Chris just touched on him, he's fun to watch. You know, as I used to always say when I was doing the commentary, he's fan friendly. You know, he's the definition of a style that puts, fannies in the seats. You know, he knows one gear straight ahead, and he gets into that gear right away, and he gets right on top of you, and he just keeps going. But he's one-dimensional. Now, it's a good dimension. It's a nice dimension. And now I'm putting my trainer's cap on. But it is. It's a nice dimension. I just said it. Fun to watch. I'll go buy a ticket and watch them because it's going to be what I want it to be. Exciting and action. But the guys we're talking about in this division, they have the ability to figure out one dimension. And I'll tell you something else they got. They got 2 dimensions. They got 3 dimensions. They got 4 dimensions. So that is how I see him from a trainer's perspective, that he's going to either have to show me something else to be able to survive in this weight class, or that dimension is going to have to be a lot more than I might think it is right now. That he can, and then fighters that could do that he could use that one dimension and still dominate guys, still beat better guys than him that are more dimensional. Because why? Because he forces them to fight his fight. And there are some guys that's the talent for them. They get you to fight their fight. I don't know if he could do that with the guys we just mentioned, but it'll be fun to find out.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Paulie, make the case for William Zepeda, the man we're calling El Tiburón, not El Camarón.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the more exciting guys in the weight class, if not the most exciting guy, maybe aside from Tank Davis, because Tank has the notoriety. But champions aside, I mean, he's the sort of the guy lurking in the shadows who's a real threat, and is also that seek and destroy guy. I'm more bullish on this guy because I don't necessarily think that he doesn't have the other dimensions to him just because we haven't had to see them yet. His last fight when he knocked out who did he stop? The guy who gave Kambosos trouble.
Maxie Hughes.
Maxie Hughes, he was very, very impressive in cutting off the ring, forcing that guy to fight his fight the way Teddy just mentioned. That was a really slippery, cagey guy in the past, and Zepeda just outright blew him away and destroyed him. So I don't know, man. I'd really be curious to see him against some of these guys. I mean, listen, this is a very, very good weight class. So in an even medium weight class, a medium talent weight class, this guy's a sure thing. And only in a weight class this deep is this guy not a sure thing. But I'll tell you what, I don't necessarily think that he's just a pressure guy. It's this fight against Cabrera is interesting because I'll tell you what, with Cabrera, you're dealing with a guy who doesn't make you look good, and he's also slippery and a bit cagey, and isn't
big too.
the
He's
most
big too,
fan-friendly
Paulie.
style. He's big too. That guy made Pitbull Cruz look rather ordinary before he succumbed, right? So I'll tell you what, if he's able to do to Cabrera what he was able to do to Hughes, that's two guys now on the ledger that he's been able to do that to, that you typically are not guys that many opponents can do that kind of thing to. So I'm pretty bullish on this guy. I'm excited to see him continue his march forward. And you know what, Cabrera is a crafty guy. Let's see what happens. Let's see in the fight. Because, if he doesn't have the dimensions necessary, like Teddy's saying is a possibility, then a guy like Cabrera might outright beat him. So this is a fight to look forward to.
It's an interesting fight. That's a good point, Paulie. The Cabrera fight, I agree. We might get a chance to see him in a light that we want to see him in, to test him in those ways.
Yeah, I think regardless, we're going to know more about Zepeda after that fight.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. It's fascinating to see what happens with Zepeda. See if he can keep that O on his record. He's 30-0 with 26 by knockout. All right, quick break, and then we will find out from Chris, Paulie, and Teddy who the man is at 135. All right, it's time to let everyone know who the man is at 135. Teddy Atlas, who the man at 135 for you?
We're talking now, right?
Yes.
Now?
Yes, sir.
Today? We're talking today?
Today.
We're talking today? Right now?
We're talking about now. Right now. Okay. Tank Davis. Tank Davis is the man.
Okay.
Right now, he's in his prime. He can do everything. Forget about the fact that he's the hardest puncher and all of that, but he's also terrific counterpuncher, sets traps, can use his legs when he has to. He's patient when he needs to be patient. Deliberate, cerebral, as both champions talked about. Right now, he's the full package. He's the complete package. I'll finish with this. He's probably the only guy I can think of beating Shakur Stevenson right now, because Shakur Stevenson is that difficult because of his style, because of his abilities, because of his eyes, because of his, his legs, and his hand speed, the way that he controls range. Tank Davis is the only guy that I can see that could possibly decipher that style and beat Shakur Stevenson. That's how good he is. That's why he's the man.
All right. Paulie, who's the man at 135?
Well, I'm going to build into this. I think Shakur Stevenson and Tank Davis could be that fight that we were talking about, that Mayweather had the Corrales, and Shakur needs that sort of opponent, that opponent where people are picking against them in the fight. You don't really know which side is going to win, and then you come out and you dominate. Shakur needs that kind of fight, and I thought Tank Davis could be that kind of fight. As a matter of fact, he's the puncher with a higher IQ than Corrales had, so it could even be a more dangerous fight, right, for a guy like Shakur Stevenson. Only problem is Tank seems to me, as talented as he is and as fun as he is to watch, more businessman than fighter, and as good as a fighter is, he's excellent. But he's never really mentioned other guys' names when they call him out. He doesn't build up fights the way you'd like to see. He never mentioned Lomachenko's name when Lomachenko would mention him and everybody else that he wanted to fight, even on 130 pounds, until now when the guy's 36 years old. He tweeted about him before. The reason I can't pick Tank Davis is this. Lomachenko, if he was the guy who was in Tank Davis's position when Lomachenko was coming up, if it was Tank Davis who was the man at that moment, and Lomachenko was the guy who was a new champion and was coming up, he would have wanted to fight Tank Davis. Tank Davis had titles at the same time as Lomachenko had titles. As a matter of fact, at lightweight, he was pawning around a fake WBA title while Lomachenko had the real WBA title. Never wanted to fight Lomachenko. Lomachenko didn't care who you were as a champion, didn't care how dangerous you were. He wanted to fight you right then, right away, right now, at that moment, at that time. Tank, businessman did a little bit. You know what I mean? He pawned around a couple of fake titles. He won some good fights. Listen, he's one of the best fighters in the world, pound for pound level. But I can't pick him as the man. Shakur is the only guy that was calling out guys consistently, wanted everybody in their prime, can't get them because he's that good. People are worried about him not only beating them and making them look so bad that their value diminishes. I got Shakur Stevenson. That's the man. He doesn't have to be the most exciting guy. The most effective, as I told you guys about in all other sports, the most effective is the guy who knows how to balance a very good defense with just enough offense. You don't like it? Then change the rules the way other sports did. You know what? Change the rules. The New Jersey Devils used to dominate the NHL with the neutralized trap. they changed the NHL format to where you allow 2-line passes instead of eliminating 2-line passes. In pitching, you didn't like the no-hitter guy. You didn't like the guy who took his time to picking guys off base and pitching no-hitters. You know what they did? They implemented the pitch clock, so you got to pitch right away. You don't have time to decide what pitch you're going to throw and how you're going to set that up. If you don't like the rules, change the rules. Until then, Shakur Stevenson is the man.
All right, Chris, 1 vote for Tank, 1 vote for Shakur. You gonna break the deadlock here? Who you got?
George, you got me as
This
a
is the man.
tiebreaker right now?
Yeah.
You got me as a tiebreaker
Or
right
you
now?
could go somewhere else. You could go someplace else.
All right, so I've been a guy that's always said Shakur Stevenson's the guy to beat, and he beats all these guys in every division. But also, I'm going to say this right now. Tank Davis is one of my favorite fighters in the world. I have been saying this for years, actually, more so than even just lately when he's been looking really, really good. My top 3 favorite fighters to watch are Tank, Inoue, and Bam Rodriguez. And all of those guys are super fun to watch. They're the most entertaining fighters in the world today, bar none. But who's the man is who beats who.
Okay.
Right? That's the question. Who beats who? And unfortunately, I don't like to agree with Paulie, but
Okay.
I'm going with Shakur Stevenson, man. Defense wins championships. I tend to lean towards boxers when it comes to boxer-puncher matchups. Not that Tank is just a boxer, just a puncher. But also, I want to see you guys lose your minds in the comments. So I got Tank. I got Shakur Stevenson.
What about I just want to see the fight? You know, what about I just want to see the fight?
Well,
you know
that'd be a great fight.
Why can't it be the way Lomachenko was when he was chasing titles? He just fights. Just make the fights. He just makes the fights. A couple of years back, my answer would have been Lomachenko. The only reason it's not Lomachenko is because he's past his prime. Still very, very good, but not the same guy. We all agree. Shakur Stevenson was always going to be the guy. Nobody has changed my mind. No matter how boring you might find him, he doesn't lose a second of a round or barely does.
Well, we spoke about that, champ, about De Los Santos. Everyone was like really, really coming down on Shakur, but like if you really watch that fight, he shut the guy out. Like it wasn't a close fight. It wasn't a close fight at all.
Show me somebody else. Go fight De Los Santos and show me how you handle him.
Listen, if you don't get hit, you can't lose. Like the guys get hit.
Nobody fights these guys. Everybody's like, oh, okay, criticize that. So go fight De Los Santos, who's going to go get probably another win or two soon, and then you go fight De Los Santos and show me how it's done. Show me how it's done. How do you do it? Nobody does that, though. Nobody does that. I got no choice.
Defeats its own purpose.
Goofy fans, they don't like my guy Shakur Stevenson. He's the best. He's the best, and nobody wants to fight him.
And we got 3 New York guys. The Giants won a Super Bowl with defense, and Jeff Hostetler as the quarterback. So there you go. Defense wins championships. All right. Let us know in the comment sections.
The Baltimore Ravens won a Super Bowl with only defense, and they released the quarterback. At the end of the season, the quarterback was so bad they released him after the Super Bowl win.
Well, all right. Let us know in the comments what you think. Who is the man at 135? And don't forget to like and subscribe. Teddy, Paul, Chris, thank you very much for your time here on ProBox TV. Who the man at 135? Let us know.